Welcome back, everyone, to the Seniors Confessions channel. My husband threw me a birthday party. My mother-in-law cursed and adamantly refused. When it was her 60th birthday, my husband kicked all the guests out, leaving her purple with rage. Just 30 minutes ago, I was sitting in a gleaming glass office on the top floor of a skyscraper, signing a multi-billion dong supply contract. In front of me, a partner shook my hand in congratulations. Beside me was Aunt Bitch, who has quietly helped me manage my chain of clean specialty stores for years. She looked at me and nodded slightly. Lan Kai, with this contract done, we can open a third branch. I smiled and closed the file. Out in society. I am Lan Kai, a woman who built her career from scratch, knows how to calculate, sign contracts, and invest money in the right places. But the moment I step through my in-law's gate, I have to become someone else. A gentle, quiet daughter-in-law, wearing old clothes, her hands always smelling of onions, garlic, and dish soap. The car stopped 2 streets away from my in-law's house. I never let the driver take me all the way to the door. I opened my bag, swapped my office jacket for a faded sun protection coat, took off my high heels, and put on my worn-out flat sandals. My neatly styled hair was also quickly tied into a bun at the nape of my neck. Then, I carried an old plastic basket containing some vegetables, tomatoes, and pork belly I intentionally bought at the market nearby. It's not that I like being fake, I just know Mrs. Hong Lean too well. My mother-in-law, if she knew I had money, she wouldn't look at me any differently. She only sees me as a walking wallet, a money vault for her to withdraw from at any time for 2 van, knock deep, and all her relatives. As soon as I pushed the gate open, Mrs. Hong Lean's voice rang out from the living room, sharp as a razor. Where have you been, showing your face at this hour? Dinner isn't cooked, the house isn't cleaned, you're married but act like a guest in this house. I paused for a beat, then lowered my head and replied softly, yes, I stopped by the market to pick up some things to cook dinner, Mom. She sat sprawl-legged on the wooden chair, scrolling through videos on her phone, feet propped on a small stool, with a steaming cup of tea and a plate of mung bean cakes on the table beside her. They were meant for her 2 daughters. Every time I stop by, she glances at the basket in my hand, her voice drawling and full of annoyance. What took you so long to buy a few things? Hand it here, let me see. I set the basket down, and she rummaged through everything as if inspecting contraband. Seeing the water spinach was a bit tough, she immediately curled her lip. You actually bought greens like this? Where are your eyes? There's barely any meat. And you didn't even buy fish. Did this family take you in just so you could go to the market like that? I said in a low voice, well, I plan to make vegetable soup, stir-fried pork, and a side of eggs to make it easy to eat. She slammed her hand down on the table with a bang. Easy to eat? What? Your husband works all day. If he comes home to food like this, where will he find the energy to work? You're a wife who doesn't know how to care for her husband, only thinking about yourself. I silently carried the basket into the kitchen. The small kitchen was stiflingly hot, the smell of old grease clinging to the yellow tiled walls. I turned on the faucet to wash the vegetables. The rushing water seemed to try and drown out the words she was still muttering in the living room. My phone vibrated in my pocket with a message from Aunt Bitch. The contract deposit has been transferred. Everything is fine. Get some rest tonight. I looked at that text, then looked at my own hands picking through each stalk of tough greens. On one side, billions of dong. On the other, a scolding over a few thousand dongs worth of vegetables. It's funny to think about, but that smile hadn't even formed before it vanished as I heard Mrs. Hong Lean's voice suddenly soften like honey. Deep, dear, have you eaten yet? I just saved some delicious cakes for you. Stop by tomorrow, and I'll give you more money to buy that dress you like. A girl has to know how to take care of herself. Don't live miserably like those women who only know how to bury their faces in the kitchen. I stood frozen by the sink, knock deep. My sister-in-law over 30, complains about being broke every single month, always switching phones or putting down deposits for cars, yet in her mother's eyes, she is still a little girl who needs to be cherished. As for me, the one paying the electricity, water, her blood pressure medication, and the kitchen roof repairs, I am just an ungrateful daughter-in-law. A while later, Min Kang arrived, set his briefcase on a chair, and looked at me in the kitchen, then at his mother in the living room. Perhaps he sensed the heavy atmosphere, but as always, he chose to remain silent. He washed his hands, sat at the table, and asked softly, "What's for dinner, dear?" I replied, "Just vegetable soup, stir-fried pork, and fried eggs." Mrs. Hong Lean immediately chimed in. There, look at how your wife takes care of you, coming home tired from work, and eating like a poor family. If I speak up, They'll say the mother-in-law is difficult. Min Kang frowned slightly but said nothing. He only sighed and pulled out his chair to sit down. That sigh was light, yet it fell into my heart like a stone. I carried the dinner tray over and placed each dish on the table. Mrs. Hong Lean kept muttering, while I just lowered my head and picked out the softest piece of egg for her. I have lived like this for 8 years, holding my tongue for peace and taking a step back to keep my husband from being conflicted. But the more I endure, the more they think I cannot feel pain. The more I retreat, the more they think I have nowhere left to go. That evening, after finishing the dishes, I stood alone by the kitchen window. The night breeze blew in, cool and light, as my phone screen lit up. It notified me that my account had just received the first deposit from a new contract. I looked at the long number on the screen, then toward the living room where Mrs. Hong Lean was laughing and talking to her daughter on the phone. I gently turned off the screen, whispering to myself, "Mother, you may think I am easy to bully, but one day you will understand. Silence does not mean I am oblivious. It just means I am waiting for the right moment." That evening dinner took place in a heavy atmosphere that was hard to put into words. I sat at the end of the table, a habit formed after many years of being a daughter-in-law. Mrs. Hong Lean sat at the head of the table, Min Kang sat beside her, while I quietly served the rice, dished out food, and checked if the dipping sauce was just right. Many might call me thoughtful, but only I know that this thoughtfulness isn't out of love, but the fear that the slightest delay will lead to criticism. Min Kang took a few bites, then set his chopsticks down and stared at me for a long time. His gaze that day held something different than usual. It wasn't his post-work exhaustion, nor the look of avoidance whenever his mother started nagging, but a hint of guilt. He cleared his throat softly and said, "Mom, this weekend is Chi's birthday. I'm planning to book a small room at our usual spot for us to have a meal together. I also want to invite Chi's Aunt Bitch to join us." My hand holding the ladle suddenly froze in midair. I couldn't remember how long it had been since I heard anyone in this house mention my birthday in such a kind way. In previous years, if I bought a small cake, Mrs. Hong Lean would scoff, saying a married woman shouldn't act like a child blowing out candles. If Min Kang remembered to buy me flowers, she would say that money would be better spent on her supplements. Over time, I learned to just forget my own birthday, as if it were something unimportant. Yet today, Min Kang himself said he wanted to organize a birthday for me. It wasn't anything big, just a small meal. But for me, that was already a luxury. I looked at him, and before I could say anything, Mrs. Hong Lean slammed her rice bowl onto the table. The sound of the bowl hitting the wood was sharp, making the whole room go silent. What was that? She narrowed her eyes at her son. A daughter-in-law's birthday requires booking a room to eat? Is this house so rich that we have money to burn? Min Kang tried to keep his voice calm. It's not a party, Mom, just a family meal. Kai has been a daughter-in-law here for 8 years. I just want her to have a happy day. Mrs. Hong Lean laughed, but there was no joy in that smile. A happy day. I've lived for nearly 60 years. How many happy days have I had? I gave birth to you and raised you, and now you're booking a birthday party for your wife right in front of your mother. Don't you find that shameful? I quickly spoke up softly. Forget it. If Mom doesn't like it, we don't need to do it. We can just eat at home. I didn't say that because I wasn't hurt, but because I know Mrs. Hong Lean too well. Once she disagrees, she will make such a scene that the one most exhausted will still be Min Kang. But this time, he didn't just nod and let it slide as usual. He turned to his mother, his voice lowering, "Mom, I will still host your birthday next month, but this weekend is my wife's birthday. They are two separate matters." Mrs. Hong Lean's face immediately darkened. She pointed at me. "You are truly clever, Lan Kai. You didn't say a word the whole meal, yet you've made my son change his tone with his mother. A cunning woman doesn't need to scream. Just sitting still and inciting her husband is enough." I choked up. That remark was more venomous than a slap. I had held back, even offered to cancel my own birthday. Yet, in the end, I was still the one at fault. I lowered my head and set down the ladle, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Mom, I didn't incite Kang. If you find it inconvenient, I won't host it anymore." "Inconvenient?" she sneered. "You say that so lightly, don't you? You want this whole family to chase after your birthday, want my son to spend money to treat you out. And now you act like you're the one suffering. Let me tell you, a daughter-in-law must know her place, birthdays and nonsense. Once married, Focus on cooking and the house. Don't pick up spoiled habits. Min Kang suddenly dropped his chopsticks. For the first time in years, the sound of his chopsticks hitting the table made Mrs. Hong Lean freeze. He looked at his mother, his eyes filled with both pain and disappointment. Have you said enough, Mom? Kai didn't ask for anything. It was me who wanted to do this for my wife. Why are you scolding her? Mrs. Hong Lean stunned for a few seconds, then immediately clutched her chest, her voice turning choked. Oh my life is so miserable. I raised my son with every bowl of rice, every hard-earned penny. Now he defends his wife and talks back to his mother. I'm not even dead yet, and I'm already treated like an outsider in this house. I have heard that routine too many times. Whenever she runs out of logic, she turns herself into a pitiful mother. But what left me stunned wasn't her crying. It was the fact that Min Kang didn't rush over to comfort her this time. He just sat there still. His hands were clenched tightly on the table. I could see him struggling, caught between the mother who raised him and the wife who had silently endured by his side for 8 years. I didn't want to make things hard for him, so I gently stood up to clear the dishes. Let's just drop the birthday idea. I'm not upset at all. But as soon as I said that, Min Kang looked at me even longer. Perhaps he knew I was lying. People only say they aren't upset when they're so sad inside that they don't even want to explain anymore. He pulled my hand, speaking very softly but clearly. No, this year I will celebrate your birthday. Mrs. Hong Lean immediately screamed, How dare you? Min Kang raised his head to look at his mother. His voice wasn't loud, but every word fell heavy. I don't need permission to love my wife. Mother. I am simply informing you. I stood frozen in the middle of the dining room, still holding the stack of bowls one hadn't managed to take to the kitchen. For the first time in 8 years, I saw my husband, who was used to being silent, stand tall before his mother. But I also understood that from that moment on, the storm in this house had truly begun. That night, after Min Kang's words, the house sank into a strange silence. Mrs. Hong Lean didn't scold any further, but her silence was even more terrifying than her criticisms. She sat motionless on the chair, staring blankly into space, her lips pressed tight. I knew she wouldn't give up. Someone like her, used to controlling others with tears and sighs her whole life, wouldn't easily let her son openly take his wife's side. The next morning, as I went down to the kitchen to cook porridge, I heard Mrs. Hong Lean on the phone in the living room. She intentionally spoke very loudly as if afraid I wouldn't hear. Van, listen to me. This house is about to fall into chaos. Your sister-in-law is truly terrible. She incited Kang to throw a birthday party for her and even talked back to me sharply. One word from me and she puts on a sad face so her husband will immediately defend her. I stood by the stove, stirring the pot of porridge while feeling a lump form in my throat. She spoke as if I had cried and made demands last night, when in fact, I was the one who wanted to let things slide. On the other end of the line, I don't know what Tu Van said, but I only heard Mrs. Hong Lean sighing again. I'm nearly 60. I don't have many years left. Yet now, if I want to say a word to my daughter-in-law, I have to watch her face. Quote, a moment later, Min Kang's phone lit up continuously. I didn't intend to look, but the screen was right there on the dining table. Tu Van's messages were clearly visible. Kang, I'm telling you, don't let your wife lead you by the nose. Mom is old, don't make her feel hurt over some trivial birthday. Right after that came a message from Knock Deep. You should love your wife in moderation. I didn't see you this eager for Mom's 60th birthday next month. Min Kang finished reading, his expression turning heavy. He didn't reply right away, just placed his phone face down on the table. I scooped the porridge into a bowl and said softly, don't mind them. Maybe we should just drop it. A birthday isn't worth causing tension in the family. Quote. He looked at me, and that gaze made me uneasy because it held both pity and self-reproach. You say it's not worth it, but for these past 8 years, has anything of yours ever been considered worth it? When you're sick, you go to the doctor alone. When you're sad, you swallow it. You even skip your own birthday. If I keep staying silent, then what am I even a husband for? I turned my face away, afraid he would see my eyes turning red. Sometimes a woman doesn't need expensive gifts, just for her husband to remember that she too has a day to be loved. That alone has been a luxury for me for many years. But Mrs. Hong Lean did not stop there. Near noon, she invited 2 neighbors over for tea. She laid out a plate of cakes, brewed a pot of fragrant tea, and began telling her story with a tone both aggrieved and bitter. You see, I haven't asked for anything at all. I only reminded my daughter-in-law to be a bit frugal, and she gave me cold looks and sharp remarks. Now she's even making Kang book a party for her birthday and inviting her whole side of the family. This house has practically become her family's house. One neighbor asked hesitantly. Well, having a small meal for your daughter-in-law's birthday shouldn't be an issue, should it? Mrs. Hong Lean immediately let out a long sigh. Small? What do you mean small? She's very cunning. She says it's simple, but who knows what she'll demand later. Women these days are ruthless. Not like in our day. Once a daughter-in-law has her husband wrapped around her finger, the mother-in-law gets pushed aside. I stood in the kitchen chopping vegetables, hearing every word clearly. The knife hit the board steadily, but inside, I was far from steady. She is painting me as a greedy, selfish person, when in fact, she is the one who has been taking our money for years to give to her 2 daughters. But this time, I didn't step out to argue. Arguing with someone who has tears ready just makes you the villain. I wiped my hands and quietly pulled out my phone to start recording. Not just the conversation with the neighbor, I also took screenshots of the messages Tu Van and Knock Deep sent to Min Kang. Then I went into my small office, opened the drawer to take out the family expense ledger, which held every cent I had covered. Utility bills, my mother-in-law's medicine, bank interest, kitchen repairs. Even the times Mrs. Hong Lean borrowed money claiming an emergency and never mentioned it again. That afternoon, Min Kang came home early from work. As soon as he stepped in, he heard Mrs. Hong Lean call out, "You're home just in time, deal with your wife yourself. She's had a funeral face all day long." I'm old, I can't stand that kind of arrogant silence. Min Kang looked at me, but I kept picking vegetables without answering. He walked over to his mother and asked directly, "Did you call Van and Deep to say something about Kai again?" Mrs. Hong Lean froze, then immediately raised her voice. "I'm telling the truth, so what is there to fear? She's a daughter-in-law who doesn't know her place. Am I not allowed to talk to my own daughters?" Min Kang set his bag on the chair, his voice colder. "If you're going to tell them the truth. I was the one who wanted the birthday party. Kai asked to cancel it, so stop making her out to be the one at fault." Mrs. Hong Lean stared at her son, as if she couldn't believe this was the Min Kang she had bossed around for years. Then she whipped around to point at me. "Did you hear that? Are you satisfied now? You just sit there and have turned this whole house upside down." I looked up at her for a long time. This time I didn't bow my head, I just said slowly, "Mother, I'm not silent because I'm wrong. I'm silent because I still want to keep peace in this house." Mrs. Hong Lean froze. Perhaps she didn't expect me to talk back. Min Kang also looked at me, a bit surprised. I put the vegetables down, wiped my hands clean, and continued. "But if that peace can only be bought by me suffering humiliation alone, then perhaps from now on, I can no longer keep it." After speaking, I walked into the kitchen, leaving behind the sound of Mrs. Hong Lean huffing in anger. I knew that from that moment on she would strike back harder, but I had already started saving every piece of evidence, not to take revenge immediately, but for when it would be needed. The truth can speak for itself. Saturday night, Min Kang got off work earlier than usual. He came home and changed his wrinkled shirt for a light blue one I had bought him last year, but which he rarely wore. I watched him stand in front of the mirror adjusting his collar, and I suddenly felt a strange sensation in my heart. It had been many years since we went anywhere together just for fun. Most of our outings were for death anniversaries, hospital visits with my mother-in-law, or resolving financial issues for Tu Van. Knock Deep, today was just a small meal for my birthday, yet I felt as nervous as a newlywed. Before leaving, I still went down to the kitchen to prepare a pot of porridge and some food for Mrs. Hong Lean. I didn't want her to have any excuse to say I was neglecting my mother-in-law. She stood at the kitchen door looking at me, her lips curled in sarcasm. "Going out for a birthday, so why pretend to be diligent? Just go, I'm old, one missed meal won't kill me." Min Kang stepped forward, his voice calm. "Mother, Kai has prepared porridge and food for you. Whenever you want to eat, just reheat it. We'll be back in about 2 hours. Quote. She didn't answer, just turned away. I knew she was angry, but I didn't want to turn this evening into another argument. I said softly, "Please rest early, Mother, I'll clean up when I get back." Then I followed Min Kang to the door. As the gate closed behind me, I felt as if I had just stepped out of a cage that was far too small. Min Kang's restaurant reservation wasn't large, located on a quiet street, not a place of luxury or noise. The private room was small but cozy. On the table sat a bouquet of white chrysanthemums with a few pink roses. Exactly the kind of flowers I like. The birthday cake placed in the center of the table was also very simple, with only the words, "Happy Birthday Lan Kai," written on it. Looking at those words, my nose stung with emotion. Aunt Bitch had arrived early. She wore a light brown ao dye, her hair in a neat bun, looking calm yet sharp. Beside her were two of Min Kang's close friends, Tin and Mai, the rare few who had witnessed me many times having to cut appointments short because my mother-in-law called me home. Aunt Bitch looked at me, her eyes filled with both pity and joy. Today, just sit down and have a proper meal. Don't get up to pour water, don't run to check with the kitchen, it's your birthday. I chuckled, but my heart softened. Min Kang pulled out a chair for me. He was a bit shy but still spoke clearly in front of everyone. I've been thoughtless these past few years. Today isn't much. I just hope you'll be a little happy. Before I could answer, the door to the private room swung open so hard the handle hit the wall. Mrs. Hong Lean appeared at the door, followed by Tu Van and Knock Deep. She was wearing a dark purple silk outfit, with some hair curlers still in her hair. Her face was flushed with anger. As soon as she walked in, she scanned the table, then glared straight at me as if she had caught a criminal. How wonderful, I'm still alive at home, yet my son takes his wife out to eat privately, and even invites outsiders to witness my abandonment. The whole room went dead silent. Min Kang stood up. Mom, why are you here? Mrs. Hong Lean sneered, why wouldn't I be here? My son's money is being spent, his wife is enjoying it, while I, the mother, am supposed to stay home and eat cold porridge? I stood up, trying to keep my voice soft. Mom, I already prepared food for you at home. This is just a small meal. Since you're here, why don't you sit down and join us? Knock Deep immediately chimed in. That sounds so nice of you to say. If I hadn't asked where Kang put it, you were planning to hide it from me until the very last minute, weren't you? What is there to celebrate for your birthday? Bitch has friends, and for my birthday next month, I suppose you plan to just feed me cold leftovers at home. Tu Van also crossed her arms, her tone sharp and cold. Lan Kai, let me be honest, as a daughter-in-law, don't try to compete with your mother-in-law. Just because your husband spoils you a little, do you think you own this house now? Min Kang frowned. Van Deep, today is her birthday. Whatever you two have to discuss, let's leave it for another day. Mrs. Hong Lean became even more enraged upon hearing this. She walked to the table, looked at the cake, and suddenly knocked the box forcefully onto the floor. The cake tilted, white cream splattered on the tiles, and a small candle rolled right to my feet. Birthday of a daughter-in-law, you say? If I don't approve, no one is allowed to celebrate anything. Who do you think you are to make this whole family pamper you? I looked at the cake on the floor, my heart aching sharply. It wasn't because I regretted the cake, but because I couldn't even keep such a small joy for myself. I bent down to pick up the broken candle, wiped the cream off my hands, and said very softly, if you don't like it, mother, then I won't blow it out. That sentence left Min Kang standing in silence. He looked at me and then at the ruined cake on the floor, his face shifting from embarrassment to pain. Perhaps only at that moment did he truly understand how I had been living in every smallest detail. Aunt Bitch slowly set her teacup on the table. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for the whole room to hear clearly. Lean, let me ask you a real question. You say your daughter-in-law is a freeloader, so who has paid for most of the electricity, water, medicine, mortgage interest, and even your daughter's debts for the past 8 years? Mrs. Hong Lean paused for a moment, but immediately retorted stubbornly, that is her duty. Once you become a daughter-in-law in my house, you have to take care of your husband's family. Aunt Bitch looked at her, her gaze turning cold. Duty does not mean being treated cheaply. A daughter-in-law is not a wallet for this whole family to open when you need money and close when you need to save face. The atmosphere in the room felt as heavy as if it were pressed down by stones. Min Kang turned to his mother, his voice lowering, tell me the truth, Mom. The money I've given you to keep for the past few years, did you use it for our family or give it to Van and Deep? Quote, Mrs. Hong Lean froze, and both Tu Van and Knock Deep immediately changed expressions. I stood still, the broken candle still in my hand, watching my husband finally address the issue everyone had tried to avoid for so long. My birthday night was ruined, but it was also that night that the veil hiding the truth in this house began to tear deeply. After the ruined birthday celebration, Min Kang drove me home in silence. Outside the window, the rows of streetlights blurred into streaks of yellow. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands resting on my handbag. Inside the bag was the broken candle I had subconsciously brought from the restaurant. It was just a small candle, but it felt like the final piece of resentment I hadn't managed to blow out yet. Arriving home, Mrs. Hong Lean went straight to her room and slammed the door. Tu Van and Knock Deep didn't come home either. Perhaps they both knew that the atmosphere in the house was no longer as easy to manipulate as before. I changed my clothes and went down to the kitchen to tidy up the cold porridge. Years of habit made me work like a machine, even though I was exhausted inside. Min Kang stood at the kitchen door watching me for a long time. Just as I was about to bend down to pick up the pot, he stepped forward and held my hand. Don't do any more, Kai. Take a rest today. I gave a faint smile. If I don't clean it, Mom will complain tomorrow. He looked at me, his voice dropping. Whatever Mom says, let me handle it. From today on, don't carry everything by yourself anymore. After saying that, he took the pot from my hand and placed it in the sink. It was only a small action, but to me, it felt heavier than 1,000 apologies. That night, Min Kang didn't sleep. I lay with my back to him, listening to him toss and turn many times. Near dawn, he spoke softly in the darkness. I'm sorry. I didn't turn around, just asked, are you apologizing for tonight or for the last 8 years? He remained silent for a long time, then replied in a hoarse voice, for both. I closed my eyes, tears rolling down onto my pillow. It wasn't out of weakness, but because the man lying beside me had finally started to see what I had endured for too long. I whispered, I don't need you to fight with your mother for me. I just need you to see clearly. Once you see it, you can decide for yourself what to do. The next morning, Min Kang woke up earlier than usual. He didn't eat breakfast, nor did he say a single word to his mother. He put on his shirt, grabbed his briefcase, and walked straight out. Mrs. Hong Lean stepped out of her room, saw him, and called out, where are you going so early? Wasn't losing face yesterday enough for you? Min Kang simply replied, I'm going to the bank. She paused for a moment, but then tried to sound firm. Go ahead, then. I've managed the family finances all these years. There's not a cent missing, so what's there to check? Quote, that statement felt like a needle pricking a sore spot. I stood in the kitchen, washing rice, hearing it clearly but not turning around. I knew that from today on, Min Kang had to find the answers himself. If the truth came only from me, he might feel sorry for me, but if he discovered it himself, he would wake up. Near noon, he called me. His voice sounded strange, both angry and choked up. Last March, you transferred 18 million to cover the bank interest, right? I remained silent for a few seconds, then replied, yes. That month, Mom said she forgot the due date, and we'd be fined if we were late. He continued, August too, and November as well. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at the boiling rice pot, the steam rising as I opened my eyes and said, would you have believed me? There was absolute silence on the other end of the line. I didn't blame him. Some truths aren't believed the moment they're spoken, especially when the listener has always trusted their mother implicitly. That afternoon, Min Kang returned home with a thick stack of bank statements. He placed them on the living room table right in front of Mrs. Hong Lean. She was looking at her phone, and when she saw the papers, she frowned. What is this? He pulled out a chair and sat down, his voice struggling to remain calm. Mother, please explain this to me. The money I gave you to pay the house interest. There are 3 months you didn't pay. Where did that money go? Your medicine money was transferred to Van's account some months, and the kitchen renovation money went to Deep's. Mom, can you explain what this is about? Mrs. Hong Lean turned pale for a moment, but quickly regained her familiar look of anger. Are you interrogating your own mother, or did your wife put you up to this? I raised you just so you could bring papers here and cross-examine your mother like a stranger? Min Kang pulled out a bank statement and pointed his finger at the withdrawal signature. Quote, this is your signature, Mom. You can't deny it. She looked at the paper, her lips trembling. A few seconds later, she blurted out a sentence that made the whole room turn cold. So what if I gave my daughters a little? They are my daughters. One's husband is struggling, the other is in need. If I don't look after them, who will? As for your wife, if she were as capable at earning money as others, would I have to struggle like this? I stood behind them, my heart feeling as if it were being crushed. It turns out that in her eyes, the burdens I silently carried were not sacrifices, but things to be expected. Min Kang looked at his mother, his eyes darkening, and said each word clearly. You took money from us to give to others, then turned around to criticize my wife for not earning enough. Do you think that's fair? Before Mrs. Hong Lean could answer, a panicked cry rang out from the gate. Nok Deep rushed into the house, her hair disheveled and her face deathly pale. As soon as she saw her mother, she burst into tears. Mom, please help me. The debt collectors have already shown up at my workplace. They said if I don't pay this week, they'll post all my loan papers online. Mrs. Hong Lean panicked and ran to support her daughter. How much do you owe? Nok Deep hung her head and mumbled, over 300 million, but with the interest, I don't even know. Min Kang jumped to his feet. 300 million, Deep? What did you do to owe that much? Nok Deep sobbed, I just borrowed it temporarily to buy stock, take an online business class, and put a deposit on a car. At first they said it would be easy to rotate the money. Who would have thought? Mrs. Hong Lean immediately turned to Min Kang, her voice wheedling yet still commanding. Kang, she's still young and foolish. You're her brother, you have to save her. Min Kang looked at his mother and then at Nok Deep. For the first time he didn't soften, he spoke very slowly, that he wouldn't pay another cent. Who borrowed it, that person pays it back. Mrs. Hong Lean was stunned. Nok Deep also stopped crying, looking at him in disbelief. I stood silently behind them, realizing that from that moment, the pillar they had always leaned on began to pull away from this house. Min Kang's words left the living room dead silent. Nok Deep stood frozen in the middle of the room, her eyes still wet but now filled with panic. Mrs. Hong Lean looked at her son as if he were a stranger. Perhaps in her entire life, she never thought there would come a day when Min Kang spoke so coldly to his sister. Ever since, whenever she complained, he would pull out his wallet. Whenever Nok Deep cried a few tears, he would go and borrow from friends. Yet I, who quietly patched up every shortfall, was never considered someone worth caring for. Mrs. Hong Lean pointed a trembling finger at Min Kang. Say that again, your sister is being pushed into a corner and you say you won't pay a single cent? Is blood family worth so little in your eyes? Min Kang replied wearily, I am not abandoning Deep. I can take her to meet the lenders to negotiate. I can help her find a job to pay off the debt, but I will not throw our money into a bottomless pit anymore. Hearing the words, find a job, Nok Deep immediately snapped her head up. You talk as if I'm useless. I borrowed because I wanted to do business, to change my life. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. I looked at my sister-in-law, still wearing the expensive silver bracelet she bought last month, her rhinestone-studded nails still intact. That is what she calls doing business. I have heard it many times before. Courses on getting rich, consignment sales, private group investments, all shady things wrapped in sweet promises of changing one's life. I said nothing, because this is the time for Min Kang to face his family himself. Seeing her son wouldn't budge, Mrs. Hong Lean changed her tone, from yelling to choking with sobs. She slumped into the chair, clutching her chest, tears beginning to flow. It's as if I never even had a son, raised him to adulthood, found him a wife and settled him down. When his mother gets old and frail, he turns his back on her. I should probably just die to satisfy you too. In the past, just hearing that, Min Kang would have immediately backed down. But that day, he stood still. He looked at his mother, eyes reddening, but no longer panicked. Mother, please don't use death to threaten me anymore. Every time you say that, I get scared and end up doing the wrong thing. I feared making you sad, so I let my wife be sad. I feared making you feel slighted, so I let her feel slighted. By today, I realize I've been wrong for long enough. Mrs. Hong Lean froze. Nok Deep went silent as well. I stood tucked by the kitchen door, my heart both pained and relieved. Pained that it took so long for him to realize this. We had to go through far too many years of hardship. Relieved because he finally said what I thought he would bury forever. But Mrs. Hong Lean is not one to give up easily. That very afternoon, she began her counterattack. She stopped scolding me in front of Min Kang and started calling relatives. Every call was made in a choked-up voice, like an old mother pushed out of her own home by her daughter-in-law. Aunt Ha, I'm suffering so much. Ever since Kang got married, he has completely changed. Today his sister is in debt and trouble, and he says he won't pay a single cent. When I speak up, he says I'm manipulating him. It's definitely the daughter-in-law teaching him all of this. Then she called Min Kang's aunt. Sister, look at my daughter-in-law, she's terrifying. She doesn't even need to argue. She stays silent and turns Kang against his mother. Now she started controlling his money, cards, and every single cent I spend. I've lived to this age and have never felt such humiliation. I heard it all, not because I wanted to eavesdrop, but because she sat in the living room and spoke loudly on purpose. She wanted those words to hit my ears, hoping I'd get angry and fight back, so she'd have proof of my disrespect. But I still kept quiet. I quietly washed the dishes, wiped the kitchen, and opened my phone to record another segment. Silence now is not resignation, but a way to keep the truth complete. By evening, Min Kang's phone started ringing incessantly. His uncle called first, voice stern. Kang, a man as the pillar of the family must know how to harmonize. Even if your mother is wrong, she's still your mother. Don't let your wife tear this family apart. Then my aunt called, blaming me for being unfilial, saying I made my mother cry until she was hoarse. Those remarks were strangely similar, all circling around one central idea. Your mother has suffered her whole life. Don't forget her just because of your wife. Min Kang tried to explain a few times at first, but the more he listened, the more silent he became. After the fourth call, he turned off his phone and placed it on the table. He looked at Ms. Hong Lean and asked bluntly, "Did you call the whole family to tell them I'm unfilial?" Ms. Hong Lean, who had been sitting there rubbing her temples, immediately replied, "Did I make any of it up? You wouldn't save your own sister. You interrogated your mother about money, and you let your wife stand there watching me get cornered. Where did I say anything wrong?" Min Kang stood up, his voice low but very clear. "You left things out. You didn't mention that Deep borrowed money to spend on herself. You didn't say that you took the money I gave you to give to Van and Deep. And you didn't mention how many bills Kai has paid for this house." Ms. Hong Lean flushed. "Are you defending your wife so much that you're listing your mother's sins in front of her?" He shook his head. "No, I am stating the truth in front of you." That sentence landed like an invisible slap. Ms. Hong Lean immediately jumped up, went straight into her room, and locked the door. From inside, we could hear her sobbing, and then her voice drifted out, "From now on, no one call me mother anymore. Just let me die in this room." I looked at Min Kang. He stood outside his mother's door for a long time, his face tense, his hand resting against the door but not knocking. Finally, he just said through the wood, "If you want to rest, then rest. I won't force you. But from tomorrow on, I will keep my own salary, and household expenses will be clearly itemized. You don't have to keep my money for me anymore." It went silent inside. Perhaps Ms. Hong Lean hadn't expected that this time, her tears wouldn't bring her son back like before. I stood behind him, my heart sinking. I knew it wasn't easy for Min Kang to say those words. For a son who was used to yielding to his mother in everything, setting boundaries was as painful as cutting into his own heart. That night, the house was chillingly quiet, but I knew this silence was not peaceful. It was the calm before a much bigger storm. Mrs. Hong Lean had lost control of the money, and was losing her grip on her son. A person like her would not stop, and when her pride was wounded, she would seek a bigger stage to save face. The next morning, the house was so quiet that you could hear every dry tick of the wall clock. Mrs. Hong Lean didn't come out for breakfast. Her door remained shut, but I knew she wasn't sleeping. Every so often, the sound of a chair being dragged came from inside, the sound of a wardrobe opening, followed by her intentionally loud sighing, as if she wanted the whole house to hear. In the past, Min Kang would have brought porridge to her bed, begging her to eat a spoonful for his peace of mind. But today, he only placed the bowl on the table and called out, "Mom, if you're hungry, come eat. I have errands to run." He wore a white shirt, carrying a file and an old phone that hadn't been used in a long time. Before heading out the door, he turned to look at me. I understood that look. He no longer wanted to hear it from anyone else. He wanted to dig to the very root himself. I just gave a slight nod. There are battles a wife shouldn't fight for her husband, especially the one between him and his own blindness. Near 10 o'clock, Min Kang called home, his voice heavy as if weighed down by stones. "Kai, I just met with the bank officer. Over the last 3 years, the mortgage was late 5 times, with 2 formal debt notices, and all payment records bear your name." I was hanging laundry in the yard. Hearing that, I stayed silent. He continued to ask, his voice raspy, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I watched the shirts fluttering in the wind. A simple question, but behind it lay 8 years of piled-up resentment. I replied, "I once did, but you said Mom probably forgot, and not to make her sad." After that, I didn't say anything more. The other end of the line went silent. I heard him clearly, taking a long breath as if trying to swallow something stuck in his throat. By afternoon, he returned home with a stack of bank statements thicker than the day before. It wasn't just home loan interest. It also included old payroll card withdrawal histories, late payment notices, and several transfer slips that Ms. Hong Lean had asked acquaintances to handle for her. He didn't call his mother out right away. He sat alone at the dining table, flipping through each page, his face turning grayer with every sheet. I placed a glass of water in front of him, and he looked up, his eyes bloodshot. In May of that year, Mom said she had joint pain and needed $20 million for medication. That money was transferred to Van's account that very same day. In September, Mom claimed the kitchen repairs cost $35 million. It turned out Deep used that exact amount as a down payment for a car. And last month, Mom took Bayo's card for a general checkup, but the withdrawn money was split into 2 parts. One for Van, one for Deep. I wasn't surprised, but I still felt a chill in my heart. The truth, when written in black and white, is always more brutal than the suspicions in one's mind. Min Kang gripped the statement tightly, his voice trembling. He had always thought he wasn't earning enough, which was why the house was always short on funds. He blamed me for being too frugal, blamed the meager meals. It turns out that for all these years, I've been taking care of the house while plugging the holes that Mom and the sisters created. I sat down across from him and said softly, I didn't want you to be hurt, but now that you've seen it, don't turn away anymore. Just then, Ms. Hong Lean's door flew open. She stood in the doorway, her hair slightly messy, but her eyes were still sharp as knives. Perhaps she had overheard part of the conversation. She walked to the table, looked at the stack of papers, and smiled coldly. Are you two holding a trial for me? Min Kang placed each statement in front of his mother. Explain this, Mom. I'm asking for the last time, why was the money I gave for the house transferred to Van and Dee? Ms. Hong Lean glanced at them and then turned her face away. I am your mother. Is it a crime for me to give my daughters some money? They married far away and suffer in every way. You are a son, and you and your wife live right here in the house. What is there to lose? Min Kang burst into laughter, but that laughter sounded more bitter than crying. Mom, you give money to your daughters using the household loan, money for medicine and our daily living expenses. Then you turn around and scold Kai for buying expensive vegetables or cooking meals with little meat. Don't you think you're being unreasonable, Mom? Mrs. Hong Lean slammed her hand on the table. Unreasonable? You're calling your own mother unreasonable. If your wife were as good at making money as others, if she knew how to manage this family properly, would I have to struggle so much? She's a daughter-in-law, yet she accounts for every single penny. It's an eyesore to me. That sentence dropped into the room like a sharp object. I saw Min Kang go silent. Perhaps only now does he realize I am not just looked down upon, but also blamed for debts I've quietly shouldered. He looked at his mother for a long time, then spoke slowly. Mom, don't mention managing the family ever again. The one managing this household is Kai, and you are taking her basket to patch up bottomless pits. Mrs. Hong Lean turned pale, but before she could retort, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and immediately answered. On the other end, Nok Deep's voice was hoarse from crying. Even though she didn't put it on speaker, Deep's voice came through loud and clear. Mom, they're at the shop now. They said if I don't pay today, they'll post my loan agreement online and send it to Van's husband's family too. Mom, please save me. Mrs. Hong Lean panicked. Where are you? Don't cry, I'll figure it out. Then she turned to Min Kang, her gaze quickly shifting to pleading. Kang, she's really in trouble. Let the past go, and save your sister just this once. Min Kang asked coldly, how much is the debt? She stammered, but Nok Deep on the phone burst into tears. 300 million is the principal, and the interest is probably near 400 now. Brother, I didn't mean to. People tricked me into a get-rich-quick class and told me to take a revolving loan. Min Kang closed his eyes. When he opened them, his gaze was no longer wavering. Deep, I can go with you to meet them and verify the documents. Whatever is legal, you will make a plan to pay back. But I will not pay it for you. From today on, no one in this house is allowed to take cheese money or my money to cover anyone else's mistakes. Mrs. Hong Lean shrieked. She is your own sister. He replied, every word clear and distinct. Because she is my sister, I must let her learn how to take responsibility. You kept bailing her out, and that's why it turned out like this. Mrs. Hong Lean stumbled into a chair, her face deathly pale, while Nok Deep's sobbing still echoed from the phone. I stood beside Min Kang without saying a word. I knew his deepest pain wasn't losing the money, but realizing the mother he trusted had used family ties as a veil for so much wrongdoing. And when that veil was torn away, no one in this house could pretend that nothing had ever happened. After Nok Deep's phone call, Mrs. Hong Lean sat dazed for almost the entire evening. But I knew that dazed look wasn't because she had come to her senses, but because she was calculating. For someone who used social status as armor, having her son cut off her funds, her daughter report debts, and her daughter-in-law witness her disgrace, she would surely try to rebuild the facade of luxury she was so proud of. And just as I suspected, only 2 days later she began talking about her 60th birthday. She ate very little at dinner that night, but her eyes were strangely bright. Waiting for Min Kang to set his bowl down, she cleared her throat. Next month I turn 60, what they call reaching old age. I've worked hard for my children all my life. Don't I even deserve a proper birthday? Min Kang looked at his mother, his voice cautious. If you want, we can have a meal at home. I'll invite my uncle and a few close relatives. Just something cozy, Mom. Mrs. Hong Lean immediately frowned. Cozy? That sounds awfully convenient for you. The whole family will look at me and think I'm being neglected by my children. I'm not asking for anything excessive. But you only turn 60 once. It must be done properly, so people know I have a filial son. I sat beside them, silently picking vegetables into my bowl. The word filial from her lips always felt like a rope, soft to the touch, but tightening with a heavy grip. Min Kang didn't answer immediately. He asked, "What exactly are you planning?" As if she had been waiting for just that, she immediately pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, filled on both sides with a guest list of about 80 people. Paternal relatives, her exercise friends, the group of ladies from the end of the street, and her old friends. I'm planning to book a polite restaurant, nothing too fancy. But it still needs a stage, a backdrop, and a camera crew. I've never had a chance to show my face in public my whole life. Min Kang put his chopsticks down as soon as he heard the number 80. Mom, our family shouldn't be throwing big events right now. Deep is in debt, the house loan is due, and I just said we'd tighten our spending. Let's be reasonable, Mom. Ms. Hong Lean gave a cold laugh. Money, money, that's all you talk about. Do you think I don't have a way? I don't need you and your wife to pay a single penny. I have a distinguished guest taking care of it. I looked up at her slightly. What distinguished guest would spontaneously pay for a stranger's birthday? But Ms. Hong Lean spoke with such smugness, as if she were sure of winning. Min Kang also looked at his mother, his eyes full of suspicion. Who is taking care of it for you? She waved her hand. You don't need to know. Have I really lived this long without any connections? Just rest easy. On that day, you just need to dress sharply and stand by my side like a proper eldest son. That evening when I went to the room, Min Kang was still sitting at his desk. He had been on his phone for a long time, so I didn't ask. A moment later, he showed me the screen. It was a message from a newly opened family restaurant in the eastern urban area. The content confirmed a birthday booking for Ms. Hong Lean, for 80 guests. The payer was listed as Min Kang. I read the line about paying after the party per Min Kang's commitment, and my heart went cold. Did you book it? He shook his head no. He had never even contacted this restaurant. The next day, Min Kang took the afternoon off and went to the restaurant himself. When he returned, he brought a photocopy of the event booking contract. His expression when he entered the house was hard to describe, both angry and pained. He placed the contract in front of me. Under the payment guarantor section was his signature. The handwriting looked similar at first glance, but I only needed to look closely to see the discrepancy. A forged signature, he said in a dry voice. I picked up the paper. The contract included not just banquet tables, but also imported wine, a stage backdrop, a dance troupe for the opening, photography, and guest gift packages. The estimated total was so high that paying it would cost Min Kang months of his salary. I set the paper down, feeling heavy-hearted. Mrs. Hong Lean had gone much further than just wanting to save face. She had used her son's name to run up a debt, even forging his signature. Min Kang sat down in his chair, his hands tightly interlaced. He never thought his mother would be capable of that. He could understand her wanting a big event, but signing his name to a contract meant that if the restaurant demanded payment, he would be the one held responsible. I didn't rush to speak. In moments like these, one provocative word could push him into a rage, and I didn't want him to handle things while feeling so heated. I poured him a glass of water and slowly asked, "Have you spoken to the restaurant yet?" He nodded. He told them that from now on, any expenses must be confirmed directly with him. He also asked for the original contract, but they said his mother gave them his number and claimed he was busy, so she signed for him first. They believed her because she sounded so convincing. I sighed. So, she didn't just want to throw a birthday party. She wanted to use that banquet to pull him back into the role of a devoted son in front of everyone. If he doesn't pay, he's unfilial. If he does pay, she wins again. Min Kang looked at me. So what should I do? I stayed silent for a few seconds. In my mind, I saw the scene of my own birthday ruined by her. The cake falling to the floor, the broken candle lying cold underfoot. But this time, I didn't want to step forward to retaliate myself. This is his mother. The one who needs to wake up isn't just Mrs. Hong Lean, but also Min Kang. I said very softly, "Don't cancel the party yet." He frowned. "You want to let her continue?" "No," I looked him straight in the eyes. "I want you to let everything go exactly where it needs to. Since she chose the stage, the truth should appear on that very same stage. But you have to do it right. With documents, with witnesses, no insults, no crying. As long as the truth is clear enough, she will have nowhere to hide. Min Kang looked down at the contract for a long time. Out in the living room, Mrs. Hong Lean is calling Tu Van, happily boasting that this birthday party will make the whole family proud. She even tells her daughter to prepare a nice dress and practice a speech about a self-sacrificing mother. I listen, and my heart turns cold. On one side is the facade of filial piety she is about to build, and on the other is the contract with the forged signature right before us. Min Kang folds the paper, his eyes gradually becoming resolute. He says fine, if Mom wants a big party, he will give it to her, but this time he will be the one to decide how it ends. I don't answer, just quietly nod. The big storm finally has a date and time. And a location. And the person stepping onto the stage this time is not me, but the very son Mrs. Hong Lean once believed would listen to her forever. That night, after Mrs. Hong Lean turned off the living room lights to sleep, Min Kang and I remained sitting at the dining table. On the table are the party booking contract, bank statements, transfer receipts, and a small notebook I've kept for years. The yellow light cast down makes Min Kang's face look several years older. He turns the pages, growing more silent as he reads. I know that silence isn't indifference, but a kind of pain when one is forced to look straight at what they once tried to deny. I pour him a glass of warm water and say softly, "You don't need to do anything extreme, just do what's right." Min Kang looks up at me. He fears he won't be calm enough. After all, she is his mother. I nod. It is precisely because she is your mother that you must be even calmer. If you lose your temper, people will only remember you as the child who embarrassed his mother. But if you lay out the truth clearly, they will see for themselves who is right and who is wrong. The next morning, Min Kang calls the restaurant. His voice is very calm, completely different from the trembling of a few days ago. He states that he is the one listed as the payer, so from now on, all expenses must be verified directly with a unique code. The restaurant manager is initially a bit confused, perhaps because earlier, Mrs. Hong Lean had spoken too confidently that her son would take care of everything. But when Min Kang requested the full list of booked services, the restaurant had to comply. The itemized list they sent back left both me and him stunned. In addition to the 80 guests, Ms. Hong Lean had booked 10 extra tables, expensive imported wine, souvenir gifts for guests, a photo backdrop, a dance troupe for the opening, a professional MC, and even a same-day video production package. Some of these items sounded less like a 60th birthday celebration and more like a way to show off. Min Kang pointed to the line item about a son gifting his mother a savings book, smiling faintly. I knew nothing about this. I read it carefully and then put the paper down. Perhaps Mom wants you to stand up and present that gift in front of everyone that day. If you don't do it, you become an unfilial son. If you do, she has more proof to boast that you are still under her thumb. Quote. Min Kang closed his eyes for a moment, then said, "Then let's keep that segment." I looked at him. He opened his eyes, his gaze now firmer. But the gift box that day will not contain a savings book. From that day on, the plan began to be prepared in silence. I would not step in for him. I only gave him what I had. Photos of rent, medical, and utility bills. The times I paid off loan interest, and the messages from Ms. Hong Lean asking for money transfers which she then deleted. Aunt Bitch also helped us review the documents, repeatedly reminding us to keep our boundaries. We are exposing the truth, not shaming. We are demanding justice, not becoming the villains. Min Kang listened very carefully. He invited the eldest uncle in the family, claiming he wanted him to witness Mom's big day. He also invited Ms. Hua, the neighborhood leader, known for being straightforward and valuing fairness. Additionally, he arranged to meet the restaurant manager privately before the party to confirm the contract and who had ordered the extra services. Everything was prepared like a small confrontation, disguised under the cover of a birthday party. That evening, Tu Van called Min Kang, her voice much sweeter than usual. "Kang, for Mom's birthday, make sure you prepare a really grand gift. Mom has sacrificed her whole life, so when you give the gift, say a few touching words. I think a savings book is most appropriate. It should be at least a few $100 million, otherwise it'd be embarrassing in front of our relatives." Min Kang turned on the speakerphone for me to hear. He replied, "I understand. Just make sure you arrive on time." Quote. Knock Deep also texted him, asking him to transfer some money in advance for a dress and hair appointment, because that day, his sister needs to look the part. Min Kang looked at the message but didn't reply. I saw his hand clench, but he had learned to restrain himself. He no longer reacts with anger. He is learning how to let the truth reveal itself in the end. In the days leading up to it, Ms. Hong Lean was visibly overjoyed. She walked around the house trying on Audaeus, checking the mirror, and calling friends to brag that her son would throw her a memorable birthday. Once, she looked at me while I was wiping the table and smiled suggestively. Lan Kai, make sure you dress simply that day. Don't try to outshine your mother-in-law. This party is mine, not yours. I simply replied, yes, don't worry, mother, I will be in my proper place that day. She thought I had surrendered and felt even more triumphant, but she didn't know that my proper place isn't hiding in the kitchen or bowing behind her. My proper place is standing next to my husband, so he is no longer alone when facing the truth. The night before the birthday, Min Kang sat for a long time in front of a red gift box, which contained no money, no gold, and no savings book, only a party booking contract with a forged signature and a list of inflated expenses. Bank statements of embezzled funds and a few other papers. I've organized them clearly. He placed his hand on the lid of the box, his voice dropping. Tomorrow, mother will probably hate me a lot. I sat down beside him. Maybe, but if you continue to remain silent, one day you will hate yourself. He turned to look at me, his gaze both painful and determined. On your birthday, mother made you lose face. This time, I'm not doing it to take revenge for you. I'm doing it so mother understands. No one will ever be allowed to use family ties as an excuse to trample on others again. I said nothing more. Outside, the night wind blew through the door cracks, feeling rather chilly. I know tomorrow won't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I don't feel like I have to shoulder this entire house alone. Min Kang has truly stepped out of his shell of silence. And when a husband learns to stand tall, no matter how big the storm, it's no longer as frightening as before. Mrs. Hong Lean's 60th birthday had finally arrived. From early morning, she was up putting on makeup, trying on the many Audaeus hanging in her closet. She held every outfit against herself, turning to ask Tu Van and Knock Deep over a video call. Is this one elegant? Does this color make me look old? Today I have to make those ladies in the exercise club green with envy. Her voice was so cheerful that if an outsider heard it, they wouldn't believe it. Just a few days ago, this house was still drowning in tears, debts, and arguments. I stood in the kitchen preparing a simple breakfast. Min Kang sat at the dining table. His shirt was neatly pressed. Beside him was a red gift box tied with a careful bow. Mrs. Hong Lean walked by, glanced at the box, her lips unable to hide her satisfaction. She asked nonchalantly, is that a gift for me? Min Kang replied calmly, yes, I'll give it to you when I'm on stage later. Hearing that, her eyes lit up. Perhaps in her mind, she had already imagined her son handing her a savings book in front of all the relatives. Guests would applaud, while I stood below, watching her being celebrated. She turned to me, her voice light but full of intention. Lan Kai, just dress simply today. It's your mother-in-law's birthday. It's not proper for a daughter-in-law to stand out too much. I was pouring water and kept smiling. Yes, don't worry, Mom, I know where I should stand today. Thinking I was being obedient, she felt even more smug. She wore a purple stone-studded Aodai, a string of faux pearls around her neck that looked quite eye-catching, hair piled high, and lips painted dark red. As she stepped out of the house, she reminded Min Kang, when we get there, remember to walk by my side. If anyone asks, say you prepared everything yourself, you hear me? I don't want people thinking I have to take care of myself. Min Kang looked at her for a long time, then nodded. I remember the restaurant that day was decorated exactly as she wanted. A large backdrop with the words celebrating a 60th birthday. Fresh flowers were placed on both sides, with yellow lights casting a warm and somewhat formal glow. As soon as she stepped out of the car, Mrs. Hong Lean adjusted her dress and beamed, like an actress who had waited too long to take the stage. She stood at the lobby entrance, shaking everyone's hand and repeating, "Oh, I'm so touched you all came." My son insisted on throwing a big celebration. I told him no, but he wouldn't listen. Standing behind her, I felt strangely calm hearing those words. In the past, I might have felt bitter, but today I only saw everything unfolding exactly according to her own script. Tu Van and Knock Deep also arrived very early. Both were dressed gorgeously in bright-colored gowns, heavily made up, moving about to greet guests as if they were the ones paying for it. Knock Deep even whispered in my ear, "Remember not to stand too close to Mom later. We have important guests today. It's best if you just handle the logistics." I looked at her without answering. It's truly sad that someone buried in debt still has the nerve to dictate where others should stand. As the party time approached, the tables were almost full. The eldest uncle in the family, Ms. Hua the neighborhood leader, several elderly relatives, and the restaurant manager were all present. Min Kang went around greeting guests with a polite but measured demeanor. I could tell he was struggling to stay composed. The gift box remained in his hand, silent yet heavy like a bell waiting to be struck. The MC stepped onto the stage, his voice booming through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to celebrate the 60th birthday of Mrs. Hong Lin, a devoted mother who has sacrificed her life for her children and grandchildren. Those words were certainly prepared by Mrs. Hong Lin, as every sentence sounded exactly like how she usually describes herself. She sat at the center table, nodding along, her eyes glistening as if she were truly moved. Then the MC invited her to the stage to give a speech. Mrs. Hong Lin walked up to the sound of applause. She took the microphone and dabbed the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, her voice choked with emotion. I don't ask for much. As a mother, just seeing my children gathered around is enough. I've suffered a lot in life, but I can endure any hardship, as long as my children don't forget me when they marry and grow up. She said the last sentence very slowly, her eyes glancing down at me. A few relatives turned to look at me with prying eyes. I sat still, my hands placed on my knees. Min Kang stood near the stage, his face expressionless, but I saw his fingers tighten around the gift box. Ms. Hong Lin continued, Today my son said he wanted to give me a special gift. Actually, I don't really need a gift. Knowing you have the heart to do it is enough to make me happy. She said that, but her eyes lit up, and her smile could not hide her excitement. Two vans started clapping from below, and Knock Deep shouted, Kang, go up and give your mother the gift. The applause spread throughout the hall. Min Kang slowly walked onto the stage. He stood next to his mother, bowed to the guests, and took the microphone from the MC. Ms. Hong Lin turned to him, her voice trembling with joy. I know my son would never let me go without. Min Kang looked at his mother. In that moment, I saw his eyes redden, but his voice was very clear when he spoke. Yes, today I have a special gift for you, Mom. This gift isn't meant to show off my filial piety, but to return the truth to our family. The whole room buzzed, and the smile on Ms. Hong Lin's lips froze. Min Kang placed the box on a small table on the stage and slowly opened the lid. Inside, there were no savings books, no gold, no jewelry, just a neatly stacked pile of papers. The catering contract with a forged signature, the list of incurred expenses, bank statements, and confirmation from the restaurant. Ms. Hong Lin turned pale, her hand holding her handkerchief trembling. Min Kang pulled out the first contract, holding it up to the stage lights. His voice rang through the microphone, chillingly calm. Ladies and gentlemen, my mother said today's party was organized by her son, but this is a catering contract billed to my name with a signature that isn't mine. Today, I ask for permission to no longer play the role of the filial son through lies and deception. The atmosphere in the hall instantly froze. Even the sound of glasses clinking against plates ceased completely. Mrs. Hong Lin stood beside him, her face turning from pale to flushed. I sat below the stage, knowing that from this moment on, the mask she had cherished her whole life had begun to fall before everyone. As soon as Min Kang's words ended, the entire hall seemed drained of all sound. The laughter and chatter from before vanished, leaving only the steady hum of the air conditioner and faint whispers from the tables at the back. Mrs. Hong Lin stood rooted to the spot beside her son. The thick layer of powder on her face could not hide the pallor spreading from her lips to her chin. Her hands trembled, and the silk handkerchief in her grip was crumpled into a ball. Then, as if snapping awake, she lunged forward to snatch the papers from Min Kang's hand. What kind of game are you playing? Today is your mother's birthday. Do you want to kill your mother right here on this stage? Her voice cracked, filled with both anger and panic. Min Kang stepped back half a pace, but he did not avert his gaze. He gripped the microphone tightly, his voice still low and clear. I am not killing you, Mom. I just won't let you use filial piety to destroy my wife and bury the truth in this house any longer. Quote, those words struck the banquet hall like a bolt of lightning. A few of the older relatives turned to look at one another. Tu Van immediately jumped to her feet from below. Kang, have you lost your mind? Can't you talk about this at home? Why are you humiliating Mom in front of so many people? Knock Deep chimed in as well. Did Kai put you up to this, didn't she? How could you do this on Mom's birthday? I sat below, hands resting on the edge of the table, remaining silent. I knew that if I stood up now, everything would just be dragged back into the drama of a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. This was the time for Min Kang to speak in his own voice, not a voice borrowed from my pain. Min Kang looked down at his two sisters, his voice growing cold. Van, deep, there is no need to rush to assign blame. Today I am not speaking out of emotion. I am only speaking based on these documents. Having said that, he gestured to the restaurant manager standing in the wings. The man stepped forward, holding a file, appearing quite nervous but still politely bowing to the guests. Min Kang handed him the microphone. The manager cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we confirm that this banquet contract was arranged directly by Mrs. Hong Lin. During the booking process, she provided Mr. Min Kang's information as the person responsible for the final payment. However, after Mr. Kang came to verify it, he confirmed that the signature on the contract is not his. Our restaurant is coordinating to clarify this and will only charge for items confirmed by the authorized party. The murmurs grew louder. The eldest uncle in the family frowned and stood up with his cane. Lin, what is the meaning of this? How could you forge your own son's signature? Mrs. Hong Lin's lips trembled, but no words came out. She turned to Tu Van and knocked deep for help, but upon seeing the eyes of so many people fixed on them, Tu Van immediately looked away. I didn't know about the contract. Mom just told me to prepare a few remarks. Tu Van spoke very quickly. Knock Deep also hurriedly defended herself. Me too. I thought Brother Kang had already agreed to everything. Mom said he would be able to handle it. Mrs. Hong Lin looked at her two daughters, her eyes wide with disbelief. Just a few minutes ago, they were both going around claiming to be filial daughters, praising their mother for being blessed. Yet when the truth came out, they were the first ones to distance themselves from her. I watched that moment, feeling no satisfaction, only a bitter sense of reality. Through blind indulgence, when the storm hits, one often reaps only ingratitude. Min Kang took back the microphone and bowed to the guests. I apologize to everyone for letting you witness such an unpleasant scene. Today was supposed to be a birthday dinner for my mother, but I cannot continue to play along with a party built on forged signatures, debts pushed onto others, and lies about sacrifice. Mrs. Hong Lin screamed, "Shut up, you, shut up. I am your mother, everything I did was for the honor of this family." Quote. Min Kang turned to her, his eyes reddening. Honor does not lie in a backdrop, or in superficial praise read by hired people. Mother, honor is living in a way that our family doesn't have to bow their heads because of me. The old woman swayed and had to grab the edge of the table. The MC standing nearby turned pale, unsure if he should continue the program. Min Kang turned to him, his voice firm, ordering an immediate halt to all ceremonies. Camera crew, turn off the machines. The additional segments haven't been confirmed by me. Cancel it all. Mrs. Hong Lin screamed, "No one is leaving. Today is my birthday, and I have already invited these people. You have no right to drive my guests away." Min Kang did not answer her. He stepped off the stage and walked straight to the lobby door. Just then, a group of late guests arrived, including friends from Mrs. Hong Lin's wellness club, carrying fruit baskets. He stood blocking the door, bowing very politely. "I apologize to you all. This ostentatious party will have to end here. My family has urgent matters to resolve before inviting anyone to dine. Please understand my situation." A guest asked in astonishment. "Wait, so we can't go in?" Min Kang replied, "If you genuinely came to wish my mother well, I appreciate it. But today, I cannot continue with a program built on falsehoods. Please take your gifts back with you. Once my family situation is stable, I will host a proper meal." His words were not harsh, but they were as hard as stone. The group of guests looked at each other, confused, and then turned away one by one. Inside the hall, a few people also began to stand up. Some shook their heads and sighed. Others whispered, "The son is still saving face for his mother. Forging signatures is no small matter." Mrs. Hong Lin watched them leave one by one, her face turning red and then purple with rage. She wanted to chase after them to keep them, but her legs felt drained of strength. Tu Van and Knock Deep stood huddled by the table, neither daring to approach their mother. I finally stood up then, not to applaud a victory, nor to add fuel to the fire. I walked slowly toward Mrs. Hong Lin, watching the woman who once ruined my birthday now standing amidst her own disintegrating party. I knew from the moment Min Kang decisively dismissed all the guests, she had lost the thing she feared losing most, her reputation. But what hurt more than her reputation was the truth. The son she thought would always obey her would bow his head no longer. I stepped close to Mrs. Hong Lean just as she nearly collapsed into a chair. The jeweled purple ao dye that made her look elegant a moment ago now made her figure seem lost in the cooling banquet hall. The flower arrangements on both sides of the stage were still fresh, the lights were still bright, and the dishes hadn't been cleared away yet, but the joyful atmosphere had shattered like a glass hitting the tiled floor. I took a glass of warm water from a server and set it down in front of her. "Drink some water, mother." Mrs. Hong Lean looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot. She swiped her hand, causing the water to slosh and nearly spill. "Why are you acting so hypocritically? You've won, haven't you? Are you satisfied now? You've managed to get your husband to stand up and humiliate his own mother in front of so many people." I wasn't angry. It was strange. At that moment, I no longer felt any anger. Perhaps when a person has seen the depths of another's selfishness, anger just tires out and fades away. I simply looked at her and said, quietly but clearly, "I don't need to win against you, mother. I only need you to stop trampling on me from now on just to prove you are superior." She turned her face away, her lips trembling. The eldest uncle in the family leaned on his cane and approached, his voice heavy. "Lean, this is no small matter. Signing your son's name on a contract to charge the restaurant, just to throw a party this big. What you did was wrong." Mrs. Hong Lean still tried to argue. "I just wanted to have a proper birthday party. I didn't pocket the money, I did it for the family's honor." Min Kang stood beside me, looking at his mother with eyes full of both pain and exhaustion. He intended to speak, but I gently touched his elbow, not to stop him from defending me, but to keep him from speaking while his throat was full of hurt. Some words spoken while in pain are sharper than knives, and once they're out, you can't take them back. I turned to the relatives who were still there and bowed slightly. "Aunts and uncles, I apologize for the awkward situation today, but I would like to clarify things once and for all. I don't begrudge a party. If Mom wanted a birthday celebration, my husband and I could have managed it. What hurts is that money meant for paying off our debts, living expenses, and medicine was misused. And in the end, all the responsibility still fell on our shoulders." I opened the small file I brought. Not all the evidence, just the clearest items that the elders could easily understand. I read each item slowly. 1 month, I covered the bank interest. Another month, I paid the utilities when Min Kang's salary card had been emptied. Then there were the amounts Mrs. Hong Lean claimed were for medicine but were actually transferred to Tu Van. For Knock Deep, I added no bitter words, didn't mention her ruining the birthday, and didn't recount the verbal abuse at home. I just let the numbers speak. A great aunt sighed, saying she was still saving face for her in-laws. Anyone else would have caused a scene long ago. Mrs. Hong Lean hung her head, her hands clutching her ao dai tightly. Just then, Tu Van stepped forward, voice hurried, "Mom, say something, please. I didn't ask for all those amounts. You told me to transfer them, so I just received them. Besides, you said that was your own private money." Hearing her sister say that, Knock Deep quickly chimed in. "That's right, I didn't know that money was Brother Kang's. Mom said she was giving it to me, so I took it. My debts were due to bad luck in business, not intentional." Mrs. Hong Lean snapped her head up to look at her 2 daughters. The look in her eyes was so pained that even I felt a pang of pity. Her whole life, she had treasured Tu Van and Knock Deep like gold. In the end, when the storm hit, the first 2 people to push the responsibility onto her were those very daughters. Min Kang looked at the 2 sisters, his voice cold. "If you take the money, take the responsibility too. Don't dump it all on Mom when trouble arises." Tu Van turned red. "What do you mean by that? Do you think I'm living in luxury? I'm suffering too." Min Kang retorted, "If you're suffering, why are you out buying designer goods every month? You say you're suffering, yet you ask Mom for money to get your hair done, go on vacation, and pay off credit cards. You may be suffering, but the one bearing the weight of that suffering is my husband and me." No one could respond. At that moment, only a few close friends and relatives remained in the banquet hall. Some of the servers stood at a distance, not daring to look directly at us. I turned to the restaurant manager and said gently, "Please stop any further planned activities for our family. For the tables that haven't been used yet, please cancel them according to policy. As for the guests who traveled from afar, please keep a few regular tables for them so they don't leave hungry. My husband and I will settle the bill for that portion clearly." Min Kang looked at me, his gaze softening. He understood why I did that. Turning away the guests was meant to end the show of hypocrisy, but we couldn't let elderly people who traveled far go hungry and leave unhappy. When seeking justice, one must still know how to maintain a minimum level of decency for those who are blameless. The eldest uncle nodded, agreeing that his daughter-in-law handled it correctly. When something is wrong, call it out, but still ensure the meal and the older guests are properly cared for. Lean, you should take a look at yourself. The person you've belittled for years is the one who saved your last shred of dignity today. Mrs. Hong Lean's shoulders trembled slightly at those words. For the first time, she did not argue back. Tu Van and Nok Deep also fell silent, looking unsightly as they had nowhere left to stand. The remaining guests sat down at the few tables that were kept. The meal proceeded much more quietly than originally intended. Yet, it was precisely that quietness that made it clearer to everyone who was reasonable and who was just showing off. I sat next to Min Kang at a small table in the corner of the hall, and he whispered, "Thank you. If it were me earlier, I probably would have just let everyone go home." I looked at the older relatives eating quietly and replied, "We don't need to be villains to prove we're right. We just need to not let others continue to bully us." Min Kang held my hand under the table. His palm was warm and slightly trembling. I knew the storm wasn't over yet. Tu Van and Nok Deep hadn't given up, and Mrs. Hong Lean wasn't truly awake to reality either. But at least in that moment, amidst the shattered banquet hall, I held on to what mattered most, my own integrity. The meal kept for a few older relatives was only half served when an argument suddenly erupted outside the hall doors. At first, it was just a few words exchanged, but soon the noise grew, drowning out the sound of dishes in the room. I turned to see Nok Deep bolt up from her chair, her face drained of all color. Tu Van also immediately grabbed her handbag, appearing ready to slip out the back door. Min Kang noticed the anomaly before I did. He stood up and walked quickly toward the door. I followed him, a bad premonition rising in my heart. Reaching the hallway, I saw 3 men in plain clothes, their faces tense, blocking the entrance. The leader held a stack of papers, his voice not too loud but sharp enough to demand everyone's attention. "Is Ms. Nok Deep here? She promised to pay a portion of her debt today, so we are here to collect." Nok Deep stepped back a few paces, her lips trembling. "You have the wrong person, I don't know you." The man opened the folder and pulled out a photocopy of an ID card, a loan agreement, and some printed text messages. "Don't know us? This is your signature, your phone number, and your message promising payment after your mother's birthday. You even said your brother would act as guarantor if needed. How can you say you don't know us now?" The entire hall erupted in murmurs once again. Mrs. Hong Lean, who had just regained her composure, stood up abruptly at the mention of a loan agreement. "Who are you people to come here and cause a scene? My daughter doesn't owe anyone anything," she said, though her voice had lost its certainty, because she herself knew that Nok Deep had been crying over debts just a few days ago. Min Kang stepped forward and calmly asked, "How much is the debt?" "Let me see the documents." The man handed the file over to him. Min Kang flipped through the pages, his expression changing rapidly. I stood nearby and took a look, seeing the figure on the paper was no longer over 300 million as Nok Deep had claimed. With late fees and compounded loans, the total was nearly 700 million. More terrifyingly, a guarantee agreement was attached with a photocopy of Min Kang's documents. He froze, his hand gripping the paper so tightly the edges curled. "Who gave you my documents?" Nok Deep burst into tears, sobbing. "Brother, I didn't mean to. They said they just needed a relative's file to show I had support, not an actual guarantee. I thought it would be fine." Min Kang turned to look at her, his voice turning cold. "Where did you get my documents?" Nok Deep didn't dare look him in the eye. She glanced quickly toward Tu Van. That single glance was enough for me to understand that nothing was simple. Tu Van immediately frowned. "Why are you looking at me? Your mess is yours to deal with. I know nothing about this." The debt collector pulled out another sheet of paper. "We even have messages here that Ms. Deep sent us, saying her sister instructed her to prepare the files. We don't care about your family's internal affairs. We only need to know who borrowed it and who will pay." Mrs. Hong Lean stumbled and gripped the edge of the table. "Deep, tell the truth. What is this all about?" Nok Deep cried until her face was distorted, but she still stammered. "Sister Van told me to do it. She said taking Kang's ID from the family records would be fine, just to gain their trust, and that I'd pay it back later without Kang ever knowing." Tu Van immediately shrieked, "Don't you dare frame me. I only said if you needed to prove family ties, you should ask Kang. I never told you to forge anything." Min Kang looked at Tu Van. "Do you have messages?" Tu Van was speechless. Nok Deep, panicked, hurriedly opened her phone to find the chat history to save herself, but that very action exposed the truth even further. In the message, Tu Van had written, "Just use Kang's documents for now. He's your brother, he won't abandon you if something happens later. The important thing is to get the money first." A single short line was enough to make all of Tu Van's denials collapse. The eldest uncle in the family slammed his cane on the floor. Good heavens, can siblings be so calculating as to take their brother's documents to borrow money? Ms. Wah, the neighborhood group leader, also looked stern. This is no longer just a family matter. Using someone else's personal information for loans is a very serious offense. I saw Min Kang close his eyes. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, but I knew he was trying to suppress his anger. If he was once hurt by his mother's favoritism, he now has to face the fact that his two sisters not only exploited him for money but dared to drag him into a debt he didn't create. The restaurant manager walked over with a tense expression. "Mr. Kang, there is one more thing. Regarding the guest gift packages and imported wine, the person who signed for them this afternoon was Ms. Tu Van, representing the family. If the family cancels that part, we need to handle it separately as the items have already been partially unsealed." Tu Van turned pale. "I signed because Mom told me to. I didn't take anything." Mrs. Hong Lean turned to her eldest daughter, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. "Van, why did you sign for the extras? I didn't tell you to sign for the imported wine." Tu Van lost her composure. "Don't blame me, Mom. You were the one who wanted a fancy party, who wanted your friends to be impressed. I just did it to save face for you." Those back and forth words exposed a naked truth. The mother and her two daughters were all dragging each other into the mud for the sake of reputation, money, and greed. No one was truly looking out for anyone else. When there's a benefit, they rely on each other. When there's trouble, they push each other forward. Min Kang took out his phone, his voice deep but firm. "I am calling the local police to file a report. As for the legal debts, whoever borrowed the money must be responsible for it. And my documents were used without my consent. I demand an investigation." Knock Deep rushed over in fear and grabbed his arm. "Don't call the police, I beg you, I'm your sister." Min Kang looked at her, his eyes turning red. "It is precisely because you are my sister that I have held back too many times. But this time you didn't just mess up with money, you attacked my honor and legal standing. I can no longer cover for you." Mrs. Hong Lean slumped into her chair, muttering, "It's over, everything is ruined." I stood beside Min Kang, gently placing my hand on his back, not to stop him, but to let him know he wasn't alone. This storm wasn't created by us. It is the result of years of lies, indulgence, and covering up. And finally, all the debts hidden under the guise of family have come due with interest. Just over 10 minutes later, the local police arrived at the restaurant. Two officers entered with a calm demeanor, asking everyone to keep order so they could work. The atmosphere in the hall was as tense as a taut string. The banquet tables were left half-finished. The guests huddled to one side, no one daring to speak loudly. Mrs. Hong Lean sat on her chair, clutching her handbag tightly with both hands. Her face was dazed, like someone who had just woken from a long nightmare. Tu Van and Knock Deep, however, were completely different. The two sisters who were just blaming each other fell silent the moment the police arrived. Knock Deep sobbed, repeating over and over, "I didn't mean to. I didn't know things would become this serious." Tu Van tried to stay calm, but her hand gripping her bag strap was trembling so visibly that everyone could see it. An officer asked Min Kang to explain the incident, and he spoke concisely and clearly, without adding emotion. He presented loan papers containing photocopies of his documents and a guarantee letter he insisted he never signed, along with text messages Knock Deep had just revealed showing Tu Van instructing her on how to use his files. He also included the banquet contract with a forged signature, noting he would handle that separately with the restaurant later. Hearing the words, "handle separately," Mrs. Hong Lean panicked and pulled his arm. Quote, "Kang, please don't make this any bigger. It's just a family matter between sisters. She was foolish and wrong. Scolding her is enough. Don't let the police take her away. I will be so humiliated, son." Min Kang looked at his mother. His eyes were weary but no longer as soft as they once were. Quote, "Mother, losing face is not as terrifying as losing one's way back. If I cover for you today, next time Deep will borrow even more, and Van will take even bigger risks. By then, it won't just be about losing face, it could cost them their lives." Knock Deep immediately rushed forward and knelt before him. "Brother, please, I beg you, just pay it off for me this one time. I promise, I swear I'll go to work and pay you back every single penny." I've heard that promise too many times. Every time she promises, a new debt springs up. Min Kang leaned down to help his sister stand up, but his voice was firm. "I won't pay your debts. I will only ensure you are treated according to the law and not threatened illegally. As for the money you borrowed, you must take responsibility for it yourself." Hearing this, Tu Van immediately chimed in. "What about me? Do you intend to let me get dragged into this? I only sent a few messages. Deep did it herself. I didn't sign anything for her." Min Kang turned to his sister, his gaze turning cold. "You are an adult. You know full well that personal documents should not be used recklessly. You didn't sign, but you encouraged and guided her. You need to tell the police the truth. Don't wait until they extract the messages and then claim you forgot." An officer invited Tu Van and Nok Deep to the station for questioning to verify the loan documents and signs of using others' personal information. Nok Deep cried while Tu Van turned pale as a sheet. Mrs. Hong Lean grabbed Min Kang's sleeve, almost begging, "Save your sisters, they're foolish, not evil. Your blood relatives, how can you bear to watch them being taken away?" Min Kang closed his eyes for a moment. I knew that sentence struck the softest part of his heart. He loves his family, his mother, and his sisters. It is precisely because of that love that he has been dragged down for so many years. I stepped up to him and whispered, "I will respect whatever you decide, but don't let your compassion become an excuse for them to keep doing wrong." He opened his eyes and turned to the officer. "I will cooperate fully. If you need a lawyer or verification documents, I will provide them. I only ask that you clarify everything according to the law. Do not let anyone be coerced, and do not let anyone evade their responsibility." That sentence was like cutting the final thread Mrs. Hong Lean had hoped to use to pull him back. She let go of her son's sleeve and collapsed into a chair. Tu Van and Nok Deep were led out to the car. Before leaving, Nok Deep looked back at her mother, but her eyes held no repentance, only blame for failing to save her. Mrs. Hong Lean watched them go, her lips moving to call her daughter's name, but no sound came out. After the two sisters were taken away, the restaurant manager approached Min Kang. He spoke tactfully, saying the restaurant didn't want to escalate things, as long as the family paid for what was used and signed a document canceling the unused services. Min Kang nodded, requesting that only the items he confirmed be clearly recorded. The phantom charges stemmed from a contract with a disputed signature. I saw him handle each item clearly and firmly, neither dodging issues nor letting others dump all the responsibility on him like before. Aunt Bitch called a trusted lawyer to provide support over the phone. She said to me briefly, "Kang can handle this. He's no longer the son who only knows how to bow his head." I watched Min Kang signing the payment document for the meals served to the elderly guests, and my heart softened. The cost was not small, but it was reasonable and transparent. He paid because it was what he truly used, not because he was forced to play the part of a dutiful son. Mrs. Hong Lean sat silently in the corner of the hall. Her updo had come loose in places, and her red lipstick was smudged. As Min Kang walked over, she looked up and asked in a hoarse voice, "Do you still consider me your mother?" That question made even my heart ache. Min Kang sat down in front of her, no longer harsh. He replied, "I still consider you my mother, which is why I am stopping you. If I ignored it, your own greed and cover-ups would only drag you down deeper." Mrs. Hong Lean looked at him, tears falling, but this time there was no screaming or wailing. Perhaps for the first time, she couldn't find any words to shift the blame. Min Kang stood up to help his mother to her feet. He did not leave her behind in the empty banquet hall. He called a car to take her home, still instructing the staff to pack up the leftover food for the elderly relatives to take with them. No one said a word in the car. Ms. Hong Lean sat in the back, clutching her handbag tightly, eyes fixed on the pitch-black window. Min Kang drove, his face calm but weary. I sat beside him, understanding one thing clearly. True victory isn't about making the other person crumble, but having the courage to set boundaries and stand for what's right without losing one's humanity. That night, when the car stopped at the gate, Min Kang stepped out to open the door for his mother. Ms. Hong Lean stumbled, and he reached out to steady her as always. But unlike other times, that hand was no longer a sign of submission. It was the hand of a mature son, who loves his mother but will no longer let her lead the whole family astray. After that birthday party, our house entered a very long period of silence. No more shouting echoing through the living room every morning. No more boastful phone calls or veiled insults about the daughter-in-law in front of the neighbors. But that quietness wasn't entirely a source of joy. It was like a yard after a heavy rain. Everything was still there, but everyone needed time to look back at what had been washed away. A few days later, Min Kang and his lawyer finished the necessary procedures with the restaurant. All legitimate expenses were paid in full. The part of the contract with the forged signature was documented separately to avoid future liabilities. The restaurant also confirmed that our family had cooperated in good faith, so they requested nothing beyond the regulations. As for Knock Deep and Tu Van, after working with the authorities, many loans were identified as being in Knock Deep's name. The use of Min Kang's documents without his consent had to be handled according to the law. Because they confessed sincerely, cooperated proactively, and rectified the consequences, the case was resolved in accordance with current regulations. However, both still had to bear civil responsibility for their debts. Knock Deep was forced to sell her new car, liquidate many valuable items, and go to work to pay off her debts month by month. Tu Van could no longer wash her hands of everything like before. The money she received from her mother had to be returned one by one. As for Mrs. Hong Lean, she barely stepped out of the house for weeks on end. The purple ao dye she wore on her birthday still hangs in the closet, untouched. Every morning, she just quietly waters the plants on the porch and stares at the gate. The woman who loved gatherings, praise, and being called an exemplary mother has suddenly become strangely quiet. One day when I returned from the market, I saw her sitting alone on the porch holding an old album. I caught a glimpse of photos of Min Kang when he was small. She gently caressed each photo, her eyes red. For the first time in many years, I no longer saw competitiveness or bitterness in her, only a mother realizing she had loved her child in the wrong way. One evening while I was cooking dinner, she slowly walked into the kitchen. I turned around, slightly surprised. She stood silent for a few seconds, then softly said, "Let me help you pick the vegetables." I smiled and handed her the basket of vegetables. The two of us stood side by side for a long time without saying a word. The sound of running water and the knife on the cutting board felt so peaceful. When it was time to bring the dinner tray out, she suddenly spoke up. Quote, "Lan Kai," I turned around. She bowed her head very low. Quote, "I'm sorry," just those 3 short words, but I felt my nose sting. I knew that for someone like her, saying those words was much harder than spending hundreds of millions on a party. She choked back tears. "I just thought that loving my daughter a lot was the right thing to do. I just thought it was normal for a daughter-in-law to have to endure things. I was always afraid of being mocked by others, so I always wanted to show off and save face. When everything fell apart, I realized the one who made me lose face most was myself." I gently helped her sit down on a small stool in the kitchen. "I was very angry with you too, but if I keep holding on to that anger, I'm the one who ends up exhausted." She burst into tears like a child, not tears to force anyone to pity her, but the tears of someone finally willing to face her own mistakes. The next afternoon, Min Kang came home from work. As soon as he stepped inside, he saw his mother and me wrapping spring rolls together in the kitchen. He stood frozen for a few seconds, then smiled. Mrs. Hong Lean looked at her son, her voice still hesitant. Quote, "Kang, my son, I am sorry." Min Kang was silent for a long time, then he walked over and sat down beside her. "I am sorry too, Mom." She looked at him, bewildered. If I had been braver sooner, more fair sooner, our family wouldn't have reached this point. "I don't blame only you, Mom. I am also at fault for staying silent all these years." Mrs. Hong Lean burst into tears. This time, she reached out to hold her son's hand. I quietly turned away so they could have their own private moment. A few months later, our little house had changed a lot. Min Kang managed all finances clearly with transparent expenses, and Mrs. Hong Lean no longer kept her son's bank cards. After that shock, Tu Van also started working a stable job to pay back the money she had received. Knock Deep stopped dreaming of getting rich quick. She worked hard every day and sent money to pay off her debts on time. As for me, my birthday that year was ruined, but what I received in return was worth more than a cake or a party. I regained a husband who knows how to stand up for what is right, a family that respects boundaries, and the peace I traded for with so many tears. Now, whenever I think back to that birthday party, I no longer feel triumphant that Mrs. Hong Lean lost face. What brings me the most relief is that she finally understood something very simple. Loving your children does not mean indulging them unconditionally. As a mother, you cannot use the word sacrifice to force your children to live for your own wrong choices. A home is only truly a place to return to when it has fairness, respect, and love for everyone. And I believe there are gifts that are not wrapped in colored paper or tied with a beautiful bow. The greatest gift that life offers to every person, sometimes it is just knowing how to recognize mistakes before it's too late, knowing when to humble yourself, and knowing how to change while there is still someone willing to hold your hand. That is also the most precious gift my family has received after all the storms we have been through.